When I wasn't framing this house last summer, it rained less than an inch in 3 months. My pond got so low I could drive down into the bottom and dig it deeper. But now that I need to get some work done, and I have untreated wood sitting outside, it's raining all the time. While this is good for the pond, I'm really starting to stress every time it rains and I have to run over here and sweep water out of the house. For the preservation of wood and my peace of mind, I decided to speed things up and call the men with nail guns again. It was such a relief to watch how quickly these long boards moved up 35 feet, where they were immediately installed. With the crew here, everything was going a lot faster, and after about 6 days of work, the main part of the roof was framed. The circle part slowed our progress, of course. After the first 4 rafters were installed, each new rafter was placed halfway between the 2 adjacent rafters. We continue working around the circle, setting rafters at midpoints until there's only enough space between them to crawl in or out of the cone. He's flipping this board around without a safety line or net, by the way. Here's what it looks like from up on that center platform. On the in-between days when the crew wasn't there, I continued to work by myself. I still had 2 framing problems to solve. I needed to hold up this piece of exterior wall, and I need to support a floating interior walkway that connects to the top of the stair. As I continued to build this recessed entry door wall, and yes, it took me 2 tries to get the header installed. The first one broke my ladder, but as I built this wall, it occurred to me I could use it to hold up 2x12 joists that would not only hold up the floating walkway inside, but I could extend them outside where they'd also hold up my curving wall. I no longer needed a curving header. While Sean and Jordan worked on the soffit framing, my friend Dave and I started putting on the building wrap. We're using 2 6-foot rolls of wrap at the same time. This sounds tricky, but if you staple it along the top as you unroll, you can put a heavy-duty clip on the unrolled portion and it will hang in place without anyone needing to hold it up. This 2-roll system saved a lot of time, because now we only had to move the scaffold around the house once instead of twice. By the way, if you're looking for a good upper body exercise, I highly recommend climbing up and down scaffolding. No matter how tired your muscles get, you'll find the energy to hold on. After we fully wrapped the entire house, and I installed the subfloor on the roof deck, and made a little change to the slope of these Diablo kickout things, it was time to once again team up with the crew. You may have noticed the genie lift in the background of an earlier clip. The guys with nail guns brought that with them. This machine made it possible for us to put the sheathing on the high part of the walls a few days ago. And today, it allowed us to reach the top of these 50-12 roof slopes. Sean had a system for the sheathing, with one man on the ground cutting OSB, while the other man stayed in the lift, calling out sizes and nailing the pieces in place. To avoid wasting time going up and down with the lift, he used a rope with a clamp to haul the pieces up. It took over 100 custom-cut pieces to cover this cone. On the days we had the luxury of a third man, Sean continued to handle the gun, Jordan did the cutting, and I got up on top of the house. The lift had a reach of about 38 feet, but because of the sloping mound, it couldn't quite reach the roof of these dormers. So that was my job. It took over a week, but eventually we made it all the way up to the roof deck and all the way around the house. Here you see Sean putting on the last piece of sheathing. This is a small but complicated roof. I had drawn a 50-12 pitch roof with a lower pitch flare out at the bottom, colliding with a 20-12 pitch hipped roof, and a 50-12 pitch conical roof, also with a flare out at the bottom. And these three roofs all had different soffit heights. I did my best to draw this in a two-dimensional roof plan before we started building, but I wasn't sure that the drawing was 100% accurate. So I asked the guys if we could build them as 3 independent roofs, and then come back later and cricket them together, which is what we did. My drawing was a little off, but that no longer matters. The roof is framed and sheathed. We aren't dried in yet, but we're getting close. So there's still some weird things happening on the property. I showed up one day and I walked over here to the pond and I found this spiral shape. I honestly have no idea what can cause this. I mean, what can create a perfect spiral in the middle of a pond? A few days after I see the spiral, I find this fish dead. I'll be honest, I didn't even know I had a fish this big in the pond. It's at least a foot long. Jump ahead about a week and a half, and these vultures show up on the corner of the property. There were 4 of them originally, but when I walked up, 2 of them flew away. These other 2 in the trees stuck around. I asked this one who died, but he didn't answer. These are big birds, by the way. They're a couple feet tall. I looked around a little bit to see if there was some kind of dead animal nearby. I didn't see anything in the immediate area. So I started walking back into the woods a little bit. I'd never walked back in here before. I don't really enjoy walking around in the woods. I found this little mound. It has a hole in it. I decided I would come back later with a different camera. I rigged up my $50 knockoff brand GoPro camera, attaching it to the end of a telescoping painter's pole. I went back out to the hole. I used the camera rig and I pushed it down into the hole. I assumed this camera had night vision, but it did not. Fully extended, this pole is about 9 feet long, but it never reached the bottom of the hole. Pulled the camera out and I reviewed the video I just recorded, and that's when I realized that $50 does not buy you the ability to see in the dark. So I decided I would dig the hole out a little wider, that way I could get my head down in there and take a look. Someone had walked up and was watching me.
I'm looking for snakes. What? Looking for snakes.
Technically, it wasn't a lie. I was looking out for snakes. It wasn't my primary focus. We stood there and stared at each other for a little while in the middle of the woods, nobody saying anything. I wasn't entirely sure whose property this was, and I'm not really sure what the law is on digging a hole on someone else's property. I planned to fill it back in, probably. But she just kept standing there, staring. I decided I should go. But I came back later. The staring person was gone. So I kept digging. Once I had it wide enough to get my shoulders down in there, I crawled in as deep as I could, and I sort of stuffed my head through an internal choke point. I waited for my eyes to adjust to the dark. Once I saw what was down there, I decided I would come back later with a better camera and maybe a weapon. In the next video, I finish drawing in my house. And I go deeper into the hole.